You are not alive. You are a breathing artifact, a cathedral of unmarked wounds, a consciousness hijacked in its infancy, still echoing with the commands of a woman who needed a mirror, not a child. What you call your life is the choreography of a possession so complete, so intimate, it never needed chains. Only need, only the unbearable hunger to be loved by the one who taught you love as self-erasure. She didn't raise you. She wrote you, line by line, until your nervous system became a manuscript of her pain. Every twitch of shame, every collapse into silence, every smile you forged while your soul screamed, these are her fingerprints. You didn't develop a personality. You developed a survival strategy. Your laughter, armor, your empathy, adaptation, your kindness, a hostage negotiation tactic you learned before you could speak. This isn't trauma, this is programming, pre-verbal, cellular, ritualistic, installed in the Holy of Holies, the place where mother was synonymous with God, and God devoured you to feed her emptiness. You were not mothered, you were mapped, turned into territory, colonized by her unmetabolized shame. You became the landfill for her unlived life. And when you resisted, when your soul tried to scream, she called it disobedience. When you withdrew, she called it coldness. When you tried to leave, she called it betrayal. And the world agreed, because we are all trained to worship the feminine no matter how feral it becomes. Carl Jung warned us. He saw what no one dared name. That the mother is not merely a figure, she is the first environment, the original God image, and when that image is fractured, it shatters the laws of reality inside the child. There is no refuge, no outside, no me that exists apart from her. You don't have mother wounds, you have psychic malware cloaked in maternal tenderness. A parasite with your mother's voice, installed in your instincts. You mistake her voice for your intuition. You mistake her fear for your caution. You mistake her absence for your unworthiness. She doesn't live outside you. She lives as you. Every time you abandon yourself to keep someone else warm, she smiles. Every time you contort your truth to avoid being too much, she wins. Every time you collapse into guilt just for existing, her programming tightens. This is not dysfunction. This is design. You are not broken. You are obedient. You have been perfectly trained to betray yourself and call it love, to stay small and call it humility, to die slowly and call it maturity. But hear me, this is not healing. This is resurrection by fire. You are not here to repair what she shattered. You are here to incinerate the entire architecture she built inside you. You are here to become the mother you never had, the wrathful, holy, truth-drenched force who no longer bows at the altar of maternal mythology. She is not your home. She is the storm you must escape, and you are not her echo. You are the silence after the bomb, the ground zero where a new self can finally emerge, bloody, sovereign, and unrepentantly alive. Listen to me with every functioning neuron in your brain, because what I'm about to reveal will either save your life or destroy everything you thought you knew about reality. Your mother performed a spiritual lobotomy on you before you were old enough to know you had a spirit. This lobotomy didn't happen in some dramatic moment of obvious abuse, though those certainly qualify. It happened through a process so subtle, so seemingly loving, that you learned to crave your own destruction. She didn't beat your spirit into submission. She seduced it into suicide. She made you complicit in your own psychological murder by convincing you that dying was how you proved your love for her. The technique is called emotional incest, not sexual abuse, but the psychological rape of your developing identity. She made you her confidant when you should have been her child, her therapist when you should have been learning to understand your own emotions, her source of meaning when you should have been discovering your own purpose. She invaded the psychological boundaries between parent and child, colonizing your consciousness with her needs, her fears, her unlived dreams, her unprocessed trauma. You became her emotional spouse, her psychological twin, her vicarious self, everything except what you were supposed to be, a separate human being with your own internal landscape. She didn't see you as an individual to be nurtured into independence. She saw you as an extension of herself, to be molded into fulfilling whatever was missing in her own truncated existence. The horror of this process is that it feels like love to a child. Being special, being needed, being the center of someone's universe, this is intoxicating to a developing ego. You learn to derive your sense of worth from how completely you could abandon yourself to meet her emotional needs. You became addicted to being indispensable, to being the solution to someone else's psychological problems, to being anything except authentically yourself. But here's where this becomes truly diabolical. She programmed you to reproduce this dynamic in every relationship for the rest of your life. You don't just seek partners who need to be saved, you unconsciously create the conditions that require saving. You don't just attract emotional vampires, you produce the very energy they feed on. You've been turned into a psychological ATM, programmed to dispense emotional resources whenever someone inserts the right combination of need, crisis, or helplessness. The mother complex isn't something you have, it's something you've become. You are a walking, talking expression of your mother's psychological dysfunction, believing it's your personality. You are her unhealed trauma in human form, her unlived life seeking expression through your choices, her suppressed rage acting out through your relationships. You think you're living your life, but you're actually being lived by her psychological blueprint. And the most catastrophic part? You protect this programming. You defend the very patterns that are killing you because they feel like home, like love, like the only version of connection you've ever known. When someone offers you genuine, unconditional acceptance, the kind your soul actually craves, your nervous system goes into full alarm because love without conditions feels foreign, dangerous, like a trap, designed to lower your defenses so you can be hurt even more deeply. You've been conditioned to equate suffering with love, sacrifice with virtue, self-abandonment with spiritual growth. You believe that healthy boundaries are selfish, that your needs are too much, that your authentic expression is somehow a betrayal of everyone who needs you to remain small, manageable, and endlessly available for their emotional consumption. This is not family dysfunction. This is systematic psychological warfare conducted by someone who should have been your protector, but instead became your first and most sophisticated predator. The woman who was supposed to teach you that you were worthy of love, instead taught you that love is something you earn through perfect compliance with others' emotional needs. We must descend deeper now, beyond the personal mother, to something far more sinister, the corruption of the mother archetype itself in your psyche. This is no longer about one woman's limitations. This is about how those limitations infected your relationship with the cosmic feminine, with life itself, with your fundamental trust in existence. The mother archetype in its pure form represents the creative force of the universe. Unconditional love, infinite abundance, the source that gives without counting the cost. It's the psychological equivalent of the sun, endlessly giving, expecting nothing in return, creating the conditions for life to flourish. When this archetype is healthy in your psyche, you experience life as fundamentally trustworthy, yourself as inherently worthy, and love as your natural birthright. But when the mother archetype becomes infected with your personal mother's pathology, something apocalyptic occurs in your psychological ecosystem. The very force that should nourish your soul becomes the agent of its destruction. Love itself becomes suspect, trust becomes naive, vulnerability becomes dangerous. The feminine principle in yourself and others becomes associated with manipulation, consumption, and the complete annihilation of your authentic self. This archetypal infection creates what Jung called the negative mother complex, but that clinical term completely fails to capture the spiritual devastation we're actually discussing. This is the psychological equivalent of nuclear fallout, contamination that spreads into every aspect of your being, poisoning your capacity for intimacy, creativity, receptivity, and joy. It's not just about having trust issues, it's about your fundamental relationship with existence being corrupted at the source. For men, this infection manifests as a deep, unconscious terror of feminine energy. They become hyper-independent, emotionally unavailable, addicted to achievement as a substitute for the nourishment they never received and no longer believe is possible. They choose partners who are as emotionally withholding as their mothers because emotional unavailability feels like home. They mistake intensity for intimacy, drama for depth, and suffering for proof that the love is real. But the infection runs deeper than relationship patterns. Men with a corrupted mother archetype often develop what appears to be strength, but is actually profound disconnection from their own emotional reality. They become experts at doing, but amateurs at being, masters of external success, but children when it comes to internal nourishment. They achieve everything they thought they wanted, but feel empty at the center because they've lost access to the very energy that makes achievement meaningful. For women, the archetypal infection creates an even more complex pathology, a split relationship with their own feminine essence. They either reject femininity entirely, becoming hyper-masculine, aggressive, competitive with other women, or they become trapped in performing femininity to win approval, losing touch with their authentic feminine power entirely. Women with corrupted mother archetypes often struggle with what psychologists call horizontal hostility, unconscious competition with other women who represent the feminine energy they've learned to distrust. They can't receive support from other women because their nervous system interprets female connection as potentially dangerous. They give until they're completely depleted because that's the only way they learn to feel valuable, but they can't receive nourishment because their system has been programmed to see feminine energy as threatening. But regardless of gender, the archetypal infection creates a fundamental perversion of your relationship with abundance, creativity, and life force itself. If the mother energy in your early experience was conditional, critical, or dangerous, then your nervous system learns that good things don't last, that abundance is finite, that you must choose between your authenticity and your survival. You develop what economists call scarcity consciousness. But this goes far beyond money or material resources. This is scarcity at the level of your soul, the deep conviction that there isn't enough love, enough acceptance, enough space for you to exist as you actually are. You live in a state of chronic psychological hunger, always seeking from others what was murdered in yourself. Never quite able to digest the nourishment that's offered because your system has forgotten how to trust that love can be safe. The archetypal infection doesn't just affect your personal relationships, it affects your relationship with life itself. You expect good things to be taken away. You can't rest in success because you're waiting for the punishment that always followed joy in your original family system. You can't celebrate your achievements because your internal mother whispers that you're getting too big for your britches. That pride comes before a fall, that you should be grateful for what you have instead of wanting more. This infection of the mother archetype is the deepest wound in human psychology because it corrupts the very source of psychological nourishment. It's like having a virus that specifically targets your immune system. The very thing that should protect you becomes the agent of your destruction. The energy that should heal you becomes the force that keeps you sick. If you're feeling that shift in perspective happening right now, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. Now we enter the most forbidden territory in all of psychology, the realm that every therapist knows about but refuses to name directly. Your mother has been systematically feeding off your life force for decades, and she's convinced you that this consumption is the highest expression of love. This is not metaphorical vampirism, this is literal energetic parasitism, where your mother uses you as a source of psychological nourishment, identity, purpose, and meaning. She doesn't just fail to give you what you need, she actively harvests from you what she needs, transforming the natural flow of energy from parent to child into a sophisticated extraction operation that has been mining your soul since before you could speak. The mechanism Jung identified is called projective identification, but this clinical term barely scratches the surface of the psychological horror we're examining. Your mother projected her unlived life onto you, not just her dreams and ambitions, but her disowned emotions, her unintegrated shadow, her disconnected soul parts. Then she demanded that you carry these projections as if they were your own authentic expressions, turning you into a psychological storage unit for everything she was too afraid to face in herself. But this psychic colonization is devastatingly sophisticated because it disguises itself as maternal care. I just want what's best for you actually means, I need you to live the life I was too cowardly to live so I can experience success vicariously. I worry about you actually means your independence threatens my sense of identity and purpose. You're so special actually means you're my narcissistic supply, my source of meaning, my psychological prop. The most diabolical aspect of this dynamic is that it creates what trauma specialists call trauma bonding. You become addicted to the very relationship that's destroying you because it's the only form of emotional intensity you've ever known. The drama, the crisis, the feeling of being desperately needed by someone whose emotional survival seems to depend on you. This becomes your template for what love feels like. You develop what therapists call codependency, but this term is grossly inadequate for the spiritual catastrophe we're actually examining. You learn to derive your entire sense of worth from how much others need you, how completely you can sacrifice yourself for their emotional requirements, how thoroughly you can disappear into their psychological landscape. You become addicted to being indispensable because being dispensable feels like death. This vampiric programming doesn't stay contained to your relationship with your mother. It metastasizes into every connection you form. You unconsciously seek partners who need to be saved, fixed, healed, or managed, because that's the only way you know how to feel valuable. You're attracted to emotional unavailability because availability feels dangerous, foreign, like you might disappear entirely if you're not actively working to earn someone's love. The psychic vampirism extends into your professional life, where you become the person everyone turns to during crisis, but no one thinks to celebrate during success. You're valued for your function, your ability to listen, to solve problems, to absorb others' emotional chaos, but rarely seen for who you are beneath your utility. You become a human emergency room, always open, always available, always ready to treat others' psychological wounds, while your own soul slowly bleeds out from neglect. But here's where this becomes truly horrifying. You've internalized the vampire, the voice inside your head that demands perfection, that criticizes your every move, that never allows you to rest in achievement. That's not your authentic inner wisdom. That's your mother's voice, now implanted in your psyche like a psychological pacemaker, ensuring that you continue to feed the system even when she's not physically present. You've become both predator and prey in your own internal ecosystem, constantly consuming your own life force to feed patterns that were never yours to begin with. You exhaust yourself trying to meet standards that were designed to keep you small, pursuing goals that don't actually fulfill you, maintaining relationships that drain you, all while telling yourself that this is what responsible adults do. The mother's unlived life doesn't just influence your choices, it has completely hijacked your decision-making apparatus. You think you're pursuing your dreams, but you're actually trying to resolve her unconscious conflicts through your achievements. You think you're expressing your creativity, but you're actually channeling her suppressed artistic impulses. You think you're choosing your relationships, but you're actually trying to heal her abandonment wounds through proxy. This possession is so complete that most people never recognize it's happening. They spend decades climbing ladders that are leaning against walls they never chose, achieving successes that feel hollow, maintaining relationships that feel obligatory, all while wondering why life feels like an endless performance of someone else's script. The only way to break free from this vampiric matrix is to recognize it for what it is. Not love, but parasitism. Not care, but consumption. Not maternal instinct, but predatory behavior disguised as affection. This recognition feels like the ultimate betrayal because you've been programmed to see this psychological cannibalism as the highest form of devotion. But Jung understood that what feels like betrayal is actually the beginning of liberation. When you stop feeding the vampire, when you withdraw your life force from her emotional ecosystem, when you refuse to carry her unlived life, when you begin investing your energy in your own authentic development, something miraculous happens. You discover that you have been possessed by a foreign entity that you mistook for love itself. What I'm about to tell you will either liberate you completely or send you into psychological shock. The only way to heal from the mother wound is to commit psychological matricide, to deliberately, consciously, and completely murder the internal mother who has been running your life since before you had a life to call your own. This is not about harming your physical mother. This is about destroying the internalized version of her that lives in your psyche like a malignant tumor. The psychological implant that monitors your every thought, controls your every impulse, and ensures that you never become powerful enough to threaten her emotional supremacy. This internal mother must die, and you must be the one to kill her, or you will remain her psychological slave until the day you physically die. The internal mother is not your actual mother. It's a psychological software program that was installed during your most vulnerable developmental years, when your nervous system was completely open and defensible. This program contains her voice, her emotional needs, her fears, her limitations, her unlived dreams, and most devastatingly, her assessment of your worth. It runs in the background of your consciousness like malware, corrupting every file it touches. This internal mother is the voice that tells you you're not good enough, that your needs are too much, that your dreams are unrealistic, that you should be grateful for whatever scraps of love you receive. It's the voice that monitors your behavior for signs of getting too big for your britches, that punishes you with guilt when you prioritize your own needs, that floods you with shame when you dare to want more than what was available in your childhood home. The internal mother doesn't just criticize, it colonizes. It takes over your decision-making process, ensuring that every choice you make serves her psychological ecosystem rather than your authentic development. It makes you choose partners who recreate her emotional unavailability, careers that fulfill her unlived ambitions, lifestyles that don't threaten her sense of superiority. It turns you into a sophisticated puppet, dancing to her emotional rhythms while believing you're expressing your own desires. Psychological matricide is the most terrifying process in human development because it means killing the very source of your original programming about love, safety, and worth. It means destroying the foundation upon which your entire identity has been built. It means acknowledging that everything you thought was your personality is actually an adaptation to her psychological dysfunction. The process begins with what Jung called the dark night of the soul, a period of complete psychological dissolution where every certainty you've held about yourself, your family, and the nature of love comes into question. You begin to see with horrifying clarity how completely your mother's psychology has infiltrated your consciousness, how thoroughly her emotional needs have shaped your entire life trajectory. This recognition brings up rage so pure and primitive that it feels like it could destroy everything in its path. This is not ordinary anger. This is the fury of a soul that has finally recognized the scope of its imprisonment, the depth of its betrayal, the magnitude of what was stolen before it even knew it possessed anything worth stealing. This rage is sacred because it's the energy of your authentic self finally fighting for its life. But the rage is just the beginning. After you burn through the fury comes something even more devastating: grief for the person you could have been if you had been allowed to develop naturally, without the constant interference of her psychological needs. You grieve not just for what was taken, but for what was never allowed to exist in the first place. Your authentic voice, your natural impulses, your original relationship with your own desires. This grief is not self-pity. It's the acknowledgement of a cosmic injustice, the recognition that your soul was sacrificed on the altar of someone else's emotional survival. You must feel this grief completely, let it wash through every cell of your being, because only by fully acknowledging the magnitude of the loss can you begin to reclaim what was taken. But grief, however necessary, is not the destination. After the death of the internal mother comes something unprecedented in your experience: empty space. For the first time in your life, there is silence where her voice used to be, openness where her control used to operate, possibility where her limitations used to constrain you. This emptiness is terrifying because you've never existed without her psychological framework, but it's also the most sacred space you'll ever encounter, the void from which your authentic self can finally emerge. The birth of your authentic self from this void is not gentle, it's violent, chaotic, explosive. Your real voice, suppressed for decades, emerges with the force of a psychological earthquake. Your genuine desires, buried under layers of adaptation, surface with the intensity of volcanic eruption. Your natural boundaries, dissolved by years of enmeshment, crystallize with the hardness of diamond. This emergence of authenticity is devastating to every relationship in your life, because your authentic self wants things your internal mother would never approve of, feels things she couldn't tolerate, expresses itself in ways that would have been dangerous in your original family system. Your authentic self is not nice. It's real, it's not accommodating, it's honest, it's not concerned with others' comfort, it's committed to your truth. The psychological matricide is complete when you can think your own thoughts without her commentary, feel your own emotions without her interpretation, make your own choices without her approval or disapproval, affecting your sense of worth. You become the authority on your own experience, the final arbiter of your own value, the sovereign ruler of your own psychological territory. What emerges from the ashes of psychological matricide is not the person you were before. That person was never allowed to exist. What emerges is something entirely new. The authentic self that was meant to be born but was still born in the delivery room of your original family system. This is not healing, this is creation ex nihilo, the spontaneous generation of a soul from the void left by the destruction of false identity. This authentic self is initially terrifying because it operates according to principles you've never experienced. Internal authority rather than external approval, intrinsic worth rather than earned value, authentic expression rather than adaptive performance. Your authentic self doesn't care if others like it, approve of it, or understand it. It exists according to its own internal logic, its own cosmic purpose, its own relationship with truth. The first principle of your authentic self is energetic sovereignty. the absolute right to control who has access to your life force, under what conditions and for how long. Your authentic self understands that energy is finite, sacred, and not to be distributed carelessly to anyone who claims to need it. It develops what Jung called sacred selfishness. Not the petty selfishness of the ego, but the holy selfishness of a soul that knows its own value. This energetic sovereignty manifests as boundaries so clear and uncompromising that they feel cruel to people who have been feeding off your previous boundaryless existence. Your authentic self says no without explanation, ends conversations that drain it, leaves situations that compromise its integrity. It doesn't justify these decisions or seek permission for them. It simply acts according to its own internal guidance system. The second principle is emotional authenticity. The refusal to perform emotions you do not feel or suppress emotions you do feel for the comfort of others. Your authentic self doesn't smile when it's angry, doesn't say it's fine when it's hurt, doesn't pretend enthusiasm for things that bore it. It expresses its emotional reality without apology, because it understands that emotional authenticity is not optional. It's the foundation of psychological health. This emotional authenticity is revolutionary because you've been trained to manage others' emotional reactions to your truth. Your authentic self reverses this dynamic entirely. Others are responsible for managing their reactions to your authenticity. If your truth disturbs them, that's information about their limitations, not evidence that you should modify your expression. The third principle is purpose alignment. The commitment to pursue only what genuinely calls to your soul, regardless of external expectations or inherited obligations. Your authentic self doesn't care what your mother wanted you to become, what society expects from your gender, age, or background, what would make others proud or comfortable. It follows its own internal compass toward whatever feels most alive, most meaningful, most essentially yours. This purpose alignment often requires abandoning paths you've invested years in building, relationships you've maintained out of obligation, identities you've constructed to win approval. Your authentic self is willing to lose everything external to gain everything internal, to trade security for authenticity, approval for integrity, comfort for truth. The fourth principle is relational selectivity, the recognition that not everyone deserves access to your authentic self, that intimacy is a privilege to be earned, not a right to be assumed. Your authentic self doesn't try to be understood by everyone or accepted by anyone who isn't capable of seeing its value. It seeks connection only with those who can meet it at its own level of consciousness, honesty, and emotional maturity. This selectivity feels elitist to people who believe that love means accepting everyone unconditionally, but your authentic self understands a deeper truth. Unconditional love doesn't mean unconditional access. You can love someone from a distance if closeness is toxic. You can wish someone well while refusing to be involved in their drama. You can have compassion for someone's limitations while protecting yourself from their impact. The resurrection of your authentic self doesn't make you perfect. It makes you real. You'll still make mistakes, still have emotional reactions, still struggle with the challenges of human existence. But these struggles will be yours, arising from your own authentic engagement with life, rather than from trying to live according to someone else's psychological blueprint. The most miraculous aspect of this resurrection is that your authentic self knows how to love and be loved in ways that your adapted self never could. Because your authentic self is not seeking healing through relationship, it can engage in relationship from wholeness. Because it's not trying to get its childhood needs met through adult connections, it can form adult connections based on genuine compatibility and mutual growth. Your authentic self attracts different people than your adapted self did. People who are also committed to authenticity, who have done their own psychological work, who can love you for who you actually are rather than for what you provide. These relationships feel different. because they're based on truth rather than need, on mutual recognition rather than mutual rescue, on shared growth rather than shared dysfunction. The resurrection is complete when you realize that you no longer need anything from your mother. Not her approval, not her understanding, not her love, not even her presence. You have become internally what you always needed her to be externally, a source of unconditional love, infinite patience, and unwavering support for your authentic self-expression. You have become your own good mother, and from that internal fullness, you can finally engage with her as an equal, rather than as a supplicant seeking something she was never capable of giving. The healing of the mother wound is not therapy. It's revolution. It's the overthrow of a psychological dictatorship that has ruled your life since before you knew you had a life to govern. It's the declaration of independence from a system of emotional taxation without representation, where your life force has been harvested to support someone else's psychological economy while you remain spiritually impoverished. This revolution is not against your mother personally. It's against the entire matrix of conditional love, psychological enmeshment, and generational trauma that has been normalized as family dynamics. When you heal your mother complex, you're not just liberating yourself, you're becoming a pattern interrupt in the generational transmission of trauma, a firewall against the psychological viruses that have infected family systems for centuries. The liberation protocol requires something that feels like the ultimate betrayal. You must choose yourself over everyone who has trained you to choose them instead. You must value your own emotional well-being over your mother's comfort, your own authenticity over familial harmony, your own growth over collective stagnation. This choice feels impossible because you've been programmed to believe that choosing yourself equals abandoning others, that self-love equals selfishness, that psychological independence equals emotional cruelty. But Jung understood that this programming is the enemy of real love, not its expression. Love that requires the sacrifice of your authentic self is not love. It's psychological cannibalism. Family loyalty that demands your spiritual suicide is not loyalty. It's organized crime masquerading as tradition. Maternal care that leaves you psychologically crippled is not care. It's systematic abuse disguised as affection. The greatest gift you can give to your mother is not your continued enslavement to her psychology, but your complete liberation from it. When you heal your mother complex, you show her what psychological freedom looks like. You model for her that love can exist without control, that connection can exist without consumption, that care can exist without codependency. You become living proof that it's possible to honor your origins without sacrificing your destination. The work of healing the mother wound is the most radical act of self-love you will ever commit. It requires you to feel everything you've spent your life avoiding, to speak truths that will disturb the peace, to make choices that will be misunderstood by everyone whose comfort depends on your continued psychological captivity. It requires you to become who you were meant to be rather than who you were conditioned to be, regardless of who that threatens or disappoints. But the alternative is to remain forever trapped in the psychological womb, forever seeking the good mother in external relationships, forever living the unlived life of the woman who gave you birth, but could never give you permission to truly live. The alternative is to pass on the same trauma to the next generation, ensuring that the cycle of psychological imprisonment continues indefinitely. The mother wound is simultaneously your greatest injury and your greatest opportunity for transcendence. It's the doorway through which you must pass to claim your cosmic birthright, the right to exist as yourself, to love and be loved without conditions, to pursue your own purpose rather than someone else's agenda, to live your one precious life according to your own internal compass rather than someone else's external expectations. Now tell me in the comments, Are you ready to commit the holy act of psychological matricide? Are you prepared to murder the internal mother who has been running your life so that your authentic self can finally be born? Are you willing to choose your own liberation over everyone else's comfort, your own truth over inherited lies, your own life over your mother's unlived dreams? If this message has detonated a nuclear explosion in the deepest chambers of your psyche, if you're ready to begin the most important revolution of your existence, write in the comments, "I choose myself." The mother wound is not your fault, but healing it is your sacred responsibility. Not to her, not to your family, not to society, but to the irreducible essence of who you were meant to be before the world taught you to be anything else. That essence is still alive inside you, waiting for you to finally choose it over everything and everyone that demands you remain small, accommodating, and eternally grateful for love that was never actually love at all. Your authentic self is not waiting for permission to exist. It's waiting for you to stop asking for permission and simply choose to exist as yourself, fully, completely, unapologetically, regardless of who that threatens or liberates. And don't forget, keep watching the next video. It's important, much more than you imagine. See you there.